Hi members, I'm speaking to you today about some of the issues that the SSTU has with the new program being run by the Barnett Government, Independent Public Schools. The nomenclature chosen by the Barnett Government to launch this new set of schools, independent public schools, in itself is divisive. It resonates upon what has been a long history of real or imagined division between government and non-government or independent public provision. Certainly over the last several years we've seen that level of competition heightened, and there's no doubt that in the attempt to create a crisis in education, we've seen governments and ministers, both at the federal and the state level, target the provision of public education in a negative way. What we're seeing here now, through the use of that name, is a government policy which is divisive, one that's attempting to subtly paint a picture that independent is best. The independent public school system, if it continues to operate the way that it is, will only result in the rupturing of the system of government education in Western Australia. The rush by this government to put out a second round of expressions of interest before the initial 34 schools have even completed their business plan, we believe is reflective of undue haste and lacks diligence in its capacity to gauge that this is the appropriate way to move forward. Seriously, members and people in the community, we need to ask the question, what is the longer term plan of this Barnett government for the government education system? If we look to similar approaches in other countries, the term charter schools tends to characterise this development that we're having here under the independent public schools. We're already seeing stories about reductions in schools funding, increased responsibilities for school boards, who at the end of the day are actually doing their work voluntarily, growing responsibilities for teachers and administrators without recompense, heightened accountability for schools and school closures, narrowing of curriculum as schools are forced to focus on testing to ensure that they can keep funding rolling in, residualisation of the government school system, little and real distinctive improvement in student outcomes, and surely that's supposed to be a key focus for schools, and politicisation of school boards. As best we can see, there's a lot of smoke and mirrors about the independent public school program. There's an awful lot of what's promised on the table for independent public schools that can and is already occurring in government schools as we speak today. You don't need to be an IPS school to engage in democratic decision making, get your school community involved, respond to the local needs of schools. Relieving schools of unnecessary administrative burdens has been one of the strong promises of the Independent Public Schools program. And it must be noted that, of course, there are unnecessary burdens, but the question needs to be asked, why isn't this being tackled across the system? Why is it being reserved just to the independent public schools? Many questions remain unanswered with respect to the Independent Public Schools program. For example, what at the end of the day are the liabilities that could face school boards and people who are members of school boards? What are the policies that the department says that can be disposed of that will not leave an independent public school open to risk in their decision making? I think what we need to do is also reflect upon the strengths of the system. The government school system has been around for an awful long time. A big investment by community, professionals, parents and students over decades. This is something that I don't think we can afford to throw out. Public education system as a whole must be cherished. It must be recognised for the importance that it plays in our system, in our society, and for what it can deliver. We've seen time and time again in the rush to privatise services from government that often these services have fallen over, and at the end of the day the government's had to pick up the pieces and the community has suffered. We don't want to see this happen with our public education system. There are a lot of strengths in being part of a system. One are the day-to-day mechanisms that are in there and built to support schools in their daily work. The other one is the infrastructure. Technology probably comes to the forefront. The costs, the savings that are actually made by the fact that we operate and can purchase in materials and support systems across the system, as opposed to purchasing these on a school-by-school basis. The SSTUWA and its members strongly believes that the best way to ensure that the Western Australia is served by a quality public education system is to keep it as a system. There are many strengths that we see that are worth valuing and improving upon, and they include the identification of over 100 years of solid service to the community, schools that provide a hub for the community and have had significant role in influencing the lives of generations of young Australians. And we think that this needs to be honoured and served and improved upon, not disrupted, disbanded and dismantled. The supports that the system itself provides for all of the schools across the state, and we do have a vast state that takes significant supports to keep public education operating, are important and are best served by being managed through a system approach. Infrastructure. There are many bits of infrastructure, for example ICT, that are best served by being managed from the centre as a whole. Cost savings go up with it, efficiencies and guarantees that those systems will be up and running to serve schools in local areas. Opportunities for professional development, sharing of resources, networking and other fundamentals that are important for collaboration for the professionals who are engaged in schools on a daily level are supported significantly by us running as a system. Putting this out to schools on a school-by-school basis, we believe will undermine guarantees around those sorts of resources continuing to flow to teachers and administrators in schools. The TUMI task force looked at teacher shortage and identified one of the strategies to solve teacher supply as being a focus on career path and the development of career path opportunities. There's no doubt that if we run the independent public school line where the staffing profile can be changed from within a school, it will significantly and severely disrupt this important characteristic of our system that enables us to attract and retain teachers and administrators. Governments have a responsibility for the provision of public education. It is a public good. Educational provision, particularly in rural and remote areas and schools in the metropolitan area that may be termed difficult, are at risk as a consequence of the independent public school program. Current incentives around staffing, transfers and guarantees of return from rural and remote locations to the metropolitan area are being restricted by the expansion of the independent public school system. Significant teacher shortage problems will face government in the near future, and as I've said before, the TUMI task force actually identified career path as a fundamental factor in making the profession attractive and keeping teachers and administrators in the game, as it were. We don't want to see this interfered with. We believe that the independent public school program will undermine and cause difficulties there. We should be prizing our public education system, not rendering it asunder. The important role that public education has, it's open, it's accessible, it plays an important part in community, building social cohesion, providing equity and access and opportunity for young people. It minimises residualisation. It must be valued and recognised and supported. The independent public school program appears to be putting these key principles and values at risk.